Ricardo Almeida had it all. Sports cars that roared through city streets, private jets that kissed the clouds, and sprawling mansions that felt more like palaces. A billionaire at the height of his success, Ricardo lived his life exactly the way he wanted. Unattached, carefree, and utterly allergic to commitment. To him, love was just a complication, a sentiment best left out of his carefully curated lifestyle. His only true passion? Closing million-dollar deals and indulging in a life of endless luxury. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Or rather, his grandmother, Dona Ofelia, did. A woman as shrewd as she was loving, Dona Ofelia had always been Ricardo's biggest supporter and his toughest critic. Even from beyond the grave, her influence loomed large. When her will was read, it came with a bombshell. Ricardo would inherit her vast family fortune, but only if he got married. And there was a catch. He had just 9 days to do it. Yes, 9 days to find a bride, tie the knot, and convince the world it was real. The news hit Ricardo like a lightning bolt. Marry? Him? The man who dodged relationships like they were landmines? Impossible. But the stakes were painfully high. Without the inheritance, his empire would crumble, his lavish lifestyle would vanish, and he'd be left with nothing but memories of his once glorious life. As the clock ticked mercilessly, Ricardo scrambled for a solution. He considered the obvious options: a rushed marriage with a socialite looking for status, or hiring a matchmaker to find him the perfect bride. But every option seemed either too complicated or too risky. How could he possibly find someone trustworthy, compatible, and willing to go along with his plan in such a short time? And just when he was about to lose hope, an unconventional idea began to form. What if he hired a bride? A woman who would agree to marry him temporarily in exchange for financial security. It was bold, absurd, and completely insane. But then again, so was the situation he was in. As Ricardo set out on his unusual quest to find the perfect candidate, little did he know that his life was about to take a turn he never expected. This wouldn't just be a convenient arrangement. It would become the adventure of a lifetime, filled with twists, turns, and the kind of love he had spent his entire life avoiding. Ricardo Almeida's frustration was mounting. The matchmaking agencies were useless, the socialites were insufferable, and time was slipping through his fingers. Every option he considered seemed more complicated than the last. How was he supposed to find a bride, someone he could trust and keep up appearances with, in just 9 days? He was used to solving problems with money and influence, but this challenge? It was turning out to be the most infuriating of his life. Tired of the constant pressure, Ricardo decided to take a break. He called his assistant, Anna, and asked her to book a table at a quiet cafe. Something low-key, away from the paparazzi and prying eyes. When he arrived, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee greeted him, and the cozy bohemian atmosphere was a much-needed reprieve from his chaotic world. He chose a table in the corner, the perfect spot to observe the world while staying unnoticed. As he waited for his order, his gaze was drawn to a waitress weaving her way through the tables. There was something about her, an effortless energy, a spark that seemed to light up the entire cafe. Her brown hair was tied up in a messy bun, a few strands rebelliously framing her face. Her honey-colored eyes sparkled with warmth as she smiled at customers, taking orders with a pen that seemed to dance in her hand. Her name was Helena, and she was unlike anyone Ricardo had ever encountered. She wasn't draped in designer clothes or vying for his attention. She was confident, independent, and utterly captivating. For the first time in a long time, Ricardo found himself intrigued. When Helena approached his table, Ricardo felt a twinge of nervousness, an unfamiliar sensation for the usually confident billionaire. "An espresso, please," he said, his voice coming out slightly hoarse. Helena smiled warmly, jotting down his order with a graceful ease. "Anything else, sir?" she asked, her eyes meeting his for just a moment. That brief connection sparked an idea, one that was bold, absurd, and completely out of character. Before he could stop himself, Ricardo leaned forward. "Miss, I have a rather unusual proposition for you," he began, his tone serious but his words bordering on ridiculous. "I need to get married in 9 days. It's a matter of urgency, and I'm willing to pay you handsomely to pretend to be my wife." Helena blinked, her expression a mixture of surprise, disbelief, and the faintest hint of amusement. "Excuse me?" she said, trying to process what she had just heard. Ricardo pressed on, explaining the terms of the arrangement. He needed a wife to fulfill the requirements of his grandmother's will, and in return, Helena would receive enough money to solve her problems. "It's strictly business," he added, trying to make the situation sound less insane. Helena stood there, coffee tray in hand, staring at the man in front of her. The offer was outrageous, but there was something about Ricardo's eyes, a sincerity, an urgency, that made her pause. She thought about her family's restaurant, her grandfather's legacy that was crumbling under the weight of debt. This could be the solution they desperately needed. But marrying a stranger? A billionaire, no less? It was a leap of faith that bordered on lunacy. After a long moment, Helena's lips curved into a mischievous smile. 9 days, right? She asked, her tone light but tinged with curiosity. Ricardo nodded, surprised by her quick response. "That's right." Helena raised an eyebrow. "And what exactly would I have to do?" Ricardo outlined the details, convincing his family and the family lawyer that the marriage was real, keeping up appearances and playing the part of his loving wife. Helena listened intently, her mind racing through the possibilities. Finally, she extended her hand with a grin. "Deal." Ricardo shook her hand, a wave of relief washing over him. Helena had just agreed to the craziest proposition of his life, and their whirlwind journey was about to begin. The Almeida mansion was a flurry of activity. In just 2 days, Ricardo and Helena's whirlwind wedding had gone from a wild idea to a meticulously planned event. Well, as meticulous as a rushed ceremony could be. Anna, Ricardo's ever-efficient assistant, had turned into a miracle worker, pulling strings and making sure everything looked picture-perfect. The chapel, a quaint little place overlooking the sea, was adorned with fresh flowers and glowing candles. It was elegant but modest, fitting for a wedding that was, at its heart, a charade. Ricardo stood at the altar in an impeccably tailored suit, his usual confidence replaced by a faint air of unease. Helena, on the other hand, wore a classic white dress with a modern twist, her simple elegance stealing the show. As she walked down the aisle, she couldn't help but chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Here she was, about to marry a billionaire she barely knew, with a script of improvised vows running through her head. The ceremony was brief but poignant. When it came time for the vows, Ricardo cleared his throat and looked at Helena. "I promise to, respect our agreement and do my best to make this work," he said, his tone awkward but sincere. Helena smirked and replied, "And I promise to tolerate your billionaire quirks, as long as you don't expect me to fetch your coffee." The guests, a small group of family and close acquaintances, laughed softly, assuming the playful banter was part of their charm. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Ricardo hesitated for a moment before leaning in to plant a quick, awkward kiss on Helena's cheek. The applause was polite, but Helena couldn't help but notice the gleam of suspicion in the family lawyer's eyes. And just like that, they were married. But the real adventure was only beginning. As per Donna Ophelia's eccentric will, their honeymoon wasn't going to be in some luxurious resort or a 5-star villa. No, she had planned something far more unconventional. A road trip in a motorhome. The idea, as she'd written, was for the couple to bond without distractions, exploring life outside their comfort zones. Ricardo, a man who thrived on luxury, was horrified. Helena? She was trying and failing not to laugh. Their ride, a clunky old motorhome Helena quickly nicknamed Turtle, became their home on wheels. From the moment they hit the road, chaos ensued. Ricardo, used to chauffeurs and private jets, struggled with even the simplest tasks. His first attempt at driving the motor home was nothing short of a disaster, as he narrowly avoided colliding with a mailbox and spent half an hour trying to reverse into a parking spot. "This thing drives like a tank," he grumbled, gripping the oversized steering wheel. Helena, ever the problem solver, stepped in. "Move over, Mr. Billionaire," she said with a smirk. "Let me show you how it's done." She took the wheel, maneuvering the motor home with a confidence that left Ricardo both impressed and slightly embarrassed. Then there was the kitchen, if you could even call it that. Ricardo's idea of cooking involved calling a personal chef, but in the cramped motorhome, he had to settle for Helena's crash course in sandwich making. "How hard can it be?" he muttered, only to end up with a lopsided mess of bread and fillings. Helena burst out laughing. "You're hopeless," she teased, fixing the sandwich with a few deft moves. But amidst the chaos, there were moments of surprising connection. One evening, after a long day of bickering over navigation and battling a flat tire, they sat under the stars, sharing a bottle of cheap wine. Helena pointed out constellations, her eyes sparkling with excitement, while Ricardo listened intently, captivated by her passion. For the first time, he saw her not as part of a deal, but as someone with depth and dreams. Then there was the night the Turtle's heater broke, leaving them shivering in the cold. Without thinking, Ricardo offered Helena his jacket, draping it over her shoulders. She looked at him, surprised. "You're not as spoiled as I thought," she said softly. "And you're not as scary as I thought," he replied with a grin. Laughter became their unspoken language, a way to navigate the awkwardness and absurdity of their situation. Every shared joke, every moment of vulnerability brought them closer, blurring the lines between their pretend marriage and something far more real. Little did they know, this chaotic road trip was setting the foundation for a connection neither of them had anticipated. A connection that would soon be tested in ways they couldn't imagine. Life on the road was beginning to change Ricardo in ways he never imagined. The billionaire who once thrived on superficial charm and effortless indulgence was now forced to confront a side of himself he had long ignored. It was in the small, quiet moments, when he saw Helena's determined smile as she fixed a leaking faucet in the motorhome, or the way she offered food to a stray dog at a roadside stop, that Ricardo began to feel something new, something real. His usual bravado started to fade. He became more thoughtful, more present. One evening, while Helena was perched on a stool in the tiny motorhome kitchen, Ricardo caught himself watching her. She was humming softly as she chopped vegetables for dinner, her honey-colored eyes focused and serene. "What's on your mind, Ricardo?" she asked, catching his gaze. He hesitated, then smiled. "I was just thinking, you're the most grounded person I've ever met." Helena laughed softly, brushing off the compliment. "That's because I've had to be. Life doesn't always give you choices." It was then that Helena began to open up. She told Ricardo about her family's restaurant, a once thriving cornerstone of her small community now teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. She shared stories of late nights spent scrubbing floors, of dreaming of a life beyond the walls of Helena's corner. And then, with a hint of pain in her voice, she spoke of Bernardo, her ex-boyfriend, a man who had promised her the world but left her with nothing but heartache and a mountain of trust issues. Ricardo listened, genuinely moved by her resilience. "Why didn't you ask for help?" he asked softly. Helena shrugged, her voice tinged with vulnerability. "Because I didn't want to be anyone's charity case. I've always believed in fixing my own messes." For the first time in years, Ricardo felt the walls around his heart begin to crumble. Helena wasn't just a spirited waitress or a convenient solution to his problems. She was someone he admired, someone who made him question the shallow life he had built. But just as their bond was beginning to solidify, a storm was brewing. Bernardo, Helena's manipulative ex-boyfriend, had heard about her sudden marriage to Ricardo. Driven by greed and jealousy, he saw an opportunity to exploit the situation for his own gain. Bernardo appeared out of nowhere during one of their stops, flashing his trademark charming smile and carrying a bouquet of red roses, undoubtedly bought from a gas station. "Helena," he drawled, as if they were long-lost lovers. "I couldn't believe it when I heard you got married. To a billionaire, no less. I had to see it with my own eyes." Helena stiffened, her eyes narrowing. "What do you want, Bernardo?" He leaned in, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Oh, come on, Helena. We both know this marriage isn't real. You're just playing house with Mr. Moneybags over there. Why not leave him? We can be together again, share the wealth, live the life we always dreamed of." Helena felt a surge of anger and disgust, but before she could respond, Ricardo appeared. His presence was commanding, his expression unreadable. "I think it's time for you to leave," Ricardo said coolly, stepping between Bernardo and Helena. Bernardo smirked, undeterred. "Ah, the husband. Tell me, how does it feel to know your wife's heart doesn't belong to you?" Ricardo didn't flinch. "It feels great," he said evenly, "because I know she's too smart to fall for your games." The confrontation escalated, but Ricardo remained calm and collected, exposing Bernardo's true intentions in front of Helena. "You're not here for her," Ricardo said, his voice sharp with disdain. "You're here because you see dollar signs. But let me make one thing clear. You don't get to manipulate her anymore. She's with me now, and I won't let you hurt her." Helena watched in awe as Ricardo stood up for her, his words filled with both strength and sincerity. For the first time, she felt truly protected, not just by his wealth, but by his heart. After Bernardo slunk away, humiliated, the tension between Ricardo and Helena shifted. That night, as they sat by the campfire, Helena turned to Ricardo. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" he asked, poking at the fire with a stick. "For standing up for me, for seeing through him when I couldn't." Ricardo met her gaze, his voice uncharacteristically vulnerable. "Helena, you deserve so much more than what he offered you. I may not have figured this whole love thing out yet. But I know one thing, I care about you, more than I ever expected to." Helena's breath caught in her throat. For weeks she had been trying to suppress the growing feelings in her heart, but in that moment, she couldn't deny them any longer. "I care about you too, Ricardo," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Under the vast canopy of stars, their connection deepened. It was no longer just a marriage of convenience. It was something far more real and far more terrifying. Ricardo couldn't shake the jealousy that burned inside him after Bernardo's appearance. For the first time, the thought of losing Helena terrified him. The billionaire who once avoided attachment was now questioning everything: his priorities, his emotions, and his heart. Helena, too, felt conflicted. What had started as a business arrangement was turning into something much deeper. Ricardo wasn't just the arrogant billionaire she thought he was. He was kind, protective, and vulnerable in ways that surprised her. But could she trust her feelings? Or was she setting herself up for heartbreak? One quiet evening under the stars, the tension between them broke. "Why did you say yes to this?" Ricardo asked softly, his voice carrying a vulnerability Helena hadn't heard before. She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "At first it was just for the money, but now I see someone I never expected to care about." Ricardo's heart raced. "I care about you too, Helena, more than I thought I could." The firelight flickered as Helena whispered, "That scares me." Ricardo reached for her hand, his touch steady. "It's real, Helena, and I'll prove it to you every day." In that moment, the walls between them fell. What had started as a farce now felt real, raw, and undeniable. Beneath the stars, Ricardo and Helena found something they had been running from their entire lives: each other. The air in Dr. Osto's office was thick with tension. The family lawyer, a man known for his razor-sharp intuition and piercing gaze, was not easily fooled. For weeks, rumors of Ricardo and Helena's whirlwind marriage had raised questions, and now, Dr. Osto was determined to get to the truth. Ricardo and Helena sat across from him, their hands clasped tightly beneath the polished mahogany table. Dr. Osto leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "Tell me," he began, his voice calm but probing. "How did you two fall in love so quickly?" Ricardo met his gaze with steady determination. "Sometimes love doesn't follow a timeline," he replied. "When I met Helena, she challenged me in ways no one ever had. She made me see the world, and myself, differently." Helena smiled faintly, adding, "It wasn't planned, Doctor Osto, but the connection we have, it's real." The lawyer's sharp eyes darted between them, looking for any sign of deceit. He pressed on, asking questions that poked at the smallest inconsistencies in their story. Ricardo and Helena responded with quick thinking and heartfelt anecdotes: how she helped him navigate their chaotic honeymoon, how he stood up for her against Bernardo. Each answer built a picture of a couple deeply entwined, though not without flaws. But the real turning point came when Dr. Osto questioned Helena's motives. "Helena," he said, his tone skeptical, "you had much to gain from marrying Ricardo. What's to say this isn't just about the money?" Ricardo's jaw tightened, and before Helena could respond, he leaned forward, his voice firm and filled with emotion. "This isn't about money. Helena has given up so much to be with me. She's the most genuine, selfless person I've ever met. If you can't see that, then you don't know her like I do." Helena's eyes widened at Ricardo's passionate defense, her heart swelling with emotion. For the first time, she truly saw how much he cared for her. Dr. Osto sat back, his expression softening. For all his doubts, he couldn't ignore the sincerity in their words, or the undeniable connection between them. After a long pause, he gave a slight nod. "Very well. I believe you." Relief washed over Ricardo and Helena as Dr. Osto finally accepted their marriage as real. As they left the office, hand in hand, they knew this wasn't just about convincing a lawyer. It was about proving to themselves that what they had was more than a facade. It was love. Ricardo and Helena's journey from strangers to true partners was anything but conventional. But now, standing side by side, they had fully embraced the love that had grown between them. Gone was the billionaire who avoided commitment and the waitress burdened by insecurities. Together, they had become equals, stronger, wiser, and deeply connected. Ricardo found a new rhythm in his life, balancing the demands of his empire with his role as a devoted husband. His days, once filled with boardrooms and business deals, now included shared meals, laughter, and moments of quiet joy with Helena. For the first time, he understood the meaning of true partnership. Helena, with Ricardo's unwavering support, reopened her family's restaurant, Helena's Corner. What had once been a struggling establishment was now a bustling hub of community and culinary excellence. Ricardo proudly stood by her side as she poured her heart into every dish, every customer interaction, and every success. Their lives became a beautiful blend of their individual dreams and shared goals. Whether it was celebrating a business win, experimenting with new recipes, or simply watching the sunset from their garden, they tackled life together, united by trust, love, and a deep respect for one another. To mark their incredible journey, Ricardo hosted a grand celebration in the Almeida Mansion's gardens. Twinkling lights adorned the trees, music filled the air, and their closest friends and family gathered to honor the couple. As they danced under the stars, surrounded by laughter and joy, Ricardo and Helena shared a smile that spoke volumes. Their story had begun as an arrangement, but it had blossomed into something neither of them could have predicted: a love built on courage, understanding, and the willingness to grow together. As the music swelled and the night carried on, one thing was clear: Ricardo and Helena were no longer pretending. They were partners in every sense of the word, ready to face the future hand in hand. Ricardo and Helena's story reminds us that love isn't about appearances or superficial agreements. It's about finding connection in the most unexpected places, building trust, and growing together. What began as a transactional arrangement turned into a journey of self-discovery, resilience, and genuine love. Their relationship wasn't perfect, but it was real. They faced challenges, overcame insecurities, and learned that love thrives not in perfection, but in the willingness to understand and support one another. As they stood together, stronger than ever, Ricardo and Helena showed us that true partnership is about more than just shared success. It's about choosing each other every single day. If this story touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Share your favorite part of Ricardo and Helena's journey in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who needs a little inspiration today. And remember, life's most beautiful stories often come from the most unexpected beginnings. See you next time for another heartwarming tale.